Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings, episode 61 and a half. I'm your host and designated switch flipper and knob turner, Dusty O'Connell. In this episode, blogger and pundit Arif Hassan joins me for a recap of the Week 1 NFL playoffs and a preview of the weekend's games for Week 2. Norse Code is proud to be 100% listener-sponsored. We would like to take this time to say thank you to everyone who listens to the show every week, and especially those of you who have helped pay to keep the lights on. And we encourage you to join our growing family of sponsors by going to the NorseCodePodcast.com website and sending us $5 via the PayPal link at the bottom of the page. Now let's get on with the show.
So I feel terrible that I had suggested Bruce Arians as a Coach of the Year candidate in the midseason awards, because the collapse of the Cardinals has been just a sad thing to watch, capped off by a dominant Carolina Panthers victory in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah. I cleaned up in the playoffs because the market was surprisingly inefficient in terms of gaming, right? Because they had the Cardinals at -6 on close, which was nuts. Right.
What?
Or not Cardinals, sorry, the Panthers at -6.
Oh,
yeah. But still, -6, right? On close. But Ryan Lindley is starting, and I think the conventional wisdom, or the wisdom that guided the market in this case, was something along the lines of, well, they did it with Carson Palmer, and then they did it with Drew Stanton. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback. Which
they could do it with Peter King or a ham sandwich
right.
if they needed to. Yeah.
Which, if that's the case, why not activate Logan Thomas? But whatever. Clearly, that's not the case, because you need a quarterback who can do things. And Ryan Lindley is definitively not that kind of quarterback. And I think betting on a guy who just got recently promoted from the practice squad to be that kind of – he got promoted from the practice squad after an abysmal showing the year before. Clearly, he's a bad quarterback. Your defense doesn't just have to be good. It has to be like all-world good. It has to be Seattle Seahawks good. It has to be, is this one of the best defenses in history good? Right? Because, say what you will about Trent Dilfer, he was much better than Ryan Lindley. And even the 2002 Ravens needed a little bit of help to win that season, right? So I thought it was insane to think that even as bad as the Carolina Panthers have been, even though the fact they had a losing record and that the Cardinals had this massive winning record, I think the fact that Ryan Lindley was in the game was significant enough to say that the markets were wildly inappropriate in terms of guessing how that game would have gone. As for the recap of the game itself, I think that, a couple of things were surprising. One of the things that I found interesting about that game, and I didn't watch it live, unfortunately, I was on the road, but I did, watch it on Game Rewind, because I can, and that's awesome. But, one of the things that I remember from the game was that Cam Newton, obviously, wasn't playing extraordinarily well, especially to start off the game. But I think that that's not nuanced enough to sort of explain sort of what was happening with Newton, which was that he was doing some things better than he had been all year, and better than a lot of quarterbacks can ever do, and not something that people ever really ascribe to Cam Newton. And I think that may be fair that they don't really give him this quality, because I don't think he exhibits this quality very often. Or rather, obviously. Maybe he exhibits it often, but maybe he doesn't exhibit it obviously. But in this case, he displayed extraordinary pocket awareness and presence. He did a very good job of navigating, the pass rush. And the Cardinals were doing an extraordinary job of destroying this bad offensive line. Not as bad as the Vikings, but this bad offensive line, with their very good front seven. And Cam Newton did a very good job of getting around that. Unfortunately, his accuracy was off, especially, at the beginning of the game. I think that it was overstated how bad his accuracy was. I think he had a lot of problems in terms of miscommunication with his receivers, more than he normally has. And I think that he played, a very good game. One thing that people don't talk about with Cam Newton, And people listening to this podcast know that I'm a Cam Newton defender, so take it with a grain of salt, maybe because maybe I have a bias for somebody that I've grown to like, even though I hated him before the 2011 draft. One thing to note about Cam Newton is that I don't know when this started, because I don't think it started his rookie year, even though that was, according to some people, still his best year. Not really the case, but he's a really smart runner, and he's been doing it all year. That he knows when to run, when to break the pocket, when to get additional yards, and he did that again in this game. He never gained more than 12 or 13 yards, but he did a very good job, sort of advancing the field. And then, of course, sort of the person who brought everything home, Jonathan Stewart, had a phenomenal game. When Stewart's healthy, he's a very, very good running back. I'm surprised he still has a lot of the physical attributes that made him such a coveted draft pick. Stewart's a combine monster. He's better than Ben Tate. We talked about Ben Tate being a combine monster before injuries robbed him of any of that explosiveness or physical capability. Stewart is that, except the injuries didn't rob him of that, and he showed that a lot in this game. 123 yards, 24 attempts against that Cardinals defense. That really brought things home. And so that game was pretty fun to watch. I think other things that are related to the game that people didn't talk about that much. Kerwin/Sherwin Williams had a terrible game after some pretty good showings earlier in the season. He averaged something like 2.3 yards an attempt, and he didn't get more than 9 yards rushing. Which, when Ryan Lindley is throwing 82 total yards on 28 attempts with 2 picks thrown in there, there's no way you can win, no matter how good your defense is. They only ended up getting 1 sack on defense. They got an interception. That Cromartie interception was a huge mistake, I think, from Cam Newton. I think it was sort of like a pre-delegated read. He nearly threw another one. The Cardinals defensively were a little lucky. They had 4 fumble recoveries to the Panthers' 2, and I think they had a better special teams or whatever. But the offensive performance is so putrid that it didn't matter. So yeah, that's my take on the game.
The fewest yards in any postseason game in the modern NFL: 78 offensive yards from Arizona, 66 of which came in the first half.
Good Lord.
Coach Arians said after the game about Ryan Lindley, I was microseconds away from saying Ryan Leaf.
No, that's Johnny Manziel. Haven't you heard?
Of Ryan Lindley, Bruce Arians said, he did great up until the first interception. The Panthers are not going to be able to pull a defensive performance like this out against Seattle, though. That is just, if I was Cam Newton, I would really have been cheering for Detroit.
Oh yeah, easily. The defensive performance was really good. Thomas Davis and Luke Kuechly played the games of their lives. I think you could say Kuechly was probably the MVP of that game.
What do you have, 11 tackles or something? It was some ludicrous double-digit number.
Yeah, I think a lot of those tackles were just scores being friendly to Kuechly, but that's not to say he played poorly. He played really well. Plus that interception, I don't know, he just kind of always knew where he needed to be in order to stop the ball. Thomas Davis had maybe a better game statistically, although, who cares? I don't know, that linebacker duo in nickel situations and non-nickel situations was astounding. So yeah, that helped a lot. I think Charles Johnson, I think he grabbed something like 2 sacks and a hit. Phenomenal. Both actually as a rusher and a run defender. So that helped a lot. I think the interior of the defensive line played pretty well. And even the cornerbacks, who have been terrible this year, even the cornerbacks and safeties played all right. Roman Harper did the thing, which proves that Ryan Lindley is bad when Roman Harper does the thing. And he had a pretty decent performance from Trey Boston and Ben Wakira, and maybe not Josh Norman, but still, the secondary played a little bit better than they have all year. In part because of Ryan Lindley. I don't think you can expect that again against the Seahawks.
No, and one of the Panthers players said after the game that it was a triumph on the part of their coaching staff, that whenever Arizona lined up, they were like, all right, we know exactly what they're going to do. We just have to run to the ball. And I mean, a side effect of that was that no matter where you looked, if you were on the Cardinals, you saw Luke Kuechly looking back at you or a Star Lotulelei just like surrounding you. But they're not going to be able to
becoming multitudes.
Exactly. It's like what's the it's like the Room of Mirrors in Enter the Dragon. You look up and it's just Star Lotulelei like fading away and appearing all around you. But that they're not going to be able to have that kind of success with the playbook that Pete Carroll's going to bust out on Saturday. Like the defense is just not going to be they're not going to be facing his face up of an offense.
Yeah, I think one of the issues with planning, like maybe you were about to mention, one of the issues with planning for the Seattle offense is that even if you figure out all the tendencies, I mean, like half of the offense is just improv, and that creates a lot of problems in terms of keeping the offense on schedule, making sure the offense does the right things at the right times, and being methodical and gaining for state, etc. There are problems, right, with that approach that crop up occasionally for Seahawks games, but I mean, the Seahawks lead the league in like explosive plays, even though they had like the fewest passing attempts in the league. They have the most deep passes, I think, 25 plus yards or 20 plus yards, depending on the statistic. They have the most plus, and you have to add runs to that, otherwise they don't have the most. Plus runs of like 8 plus yards or something like that. Anyway, they had an extraordinary amount of explosive plays, in part because, Russell Wilson's really good at improvising. And if the reason that the Panthers played better than they ever have on defense this year is because they game planned better, because the offense was something they could predict well, if that's the reason, instead of superstar instincts from like 10 of the 11 players, then there's going to be some problems, I think, in terms of replicating that performance against a Seahawks team that thrives on like playing jazz music. Like it's just going to be really difficult, especially, when you talk about like, Seahawks incredible home field advantage and all that, especially when, you have to deal with all of that jazz. Plus, I think the offense is just going to be worse against the Seattle defense than it was against the Cardinals defense. And I don't think that's like, putting myself out there too far to say.
You're not going to make that your wildly irresponsible prognostication?
Yeah, right.
Well, and the thing is like, so week 8, would you say that Seattle's defense was still, in the basement, or at least like basement-ish, basement curious?
In basement curious, relative to the standard they set for themselves, yeah.
Well, that bodes very poorly for Carolina because, I mean, even though they had, a couple of injuries, D'Angelo Williams, Mike Tolbert, slowing down their run game, Carolina was kept out of the end zone completely by the basement version of the Seattle defense in week 8. I mean, they had to settle for 3 field goals after getting inside the 20 3 times.
Yeah, Cam was still hurt. I mean, so both of those are true.
Well, then does the question is, does, the addition of Cam Newton make the offense equally as effective as the, I guess, resurgence of, Seattle D and, the 12th man make Seattle better? And I'm going to go with no.
Yeah, I agree. No. The question then is are the Seattle Seahawks at home 11 points better than the Carolina Panthers? I say yes.
That seems reasonable to me.
Yeah.
That's the line as it stands right now, 11 points.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I'd give them 2 touchdowns. I mean, they only the injured versions of both teams, and it was a super low scoring game. Seattle won 13-9. What's the over under?
40.
Ooh.
You gonna take that?
I feel like I almost have to. Well, yeah, I'll take the under.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I would take the under too.
What do you think? Like 21-6, 24-6, something like that?
Yeah, that sounds really close to right. Yeah, 24-6, 21-6.
I suppose we could do the other NFC team, the Cowboys, and their 13th, 14th, and 15th players on the field wearing striped jerseys and conveniently picking up flags and refusing to call penalties.
My favorite is when the NFL admitted to some officiating errors in like a letter to the Lions or something. I mean, they do this every week. functionally, but some officiating errors but the one that was highlighted was a missed holding call on Dominican Sue, which is hugely significant because it was on that final drive of the game. But I mean, like, that's not the one people remember.
No, everybody remembers the picked up flag because that was dumb, and the internet had a cow about it.
It was done poorly, right? Because you could make an argument for that not being pass interference. Not necessarily a very good one, given how the league has been, sort of judging that this year. And other years, maybe a better argument. But you can make an argument that that's not pass interference. There's a borderline case, and technically face guarding is not a foul. All that stuff.
Well, yeah, but they made an argument, but it was a bad argument. Like, they didn't.
Sure. Right, but I think the bigger problem, and everyone was like, no, ignore the hot take. Here's my more measured take to prove that I'm smart. In this case, I think that is the case. Like, I don't think it's just like proving that you're a more measured or not hot takey individual. To say that the bigger problem was actually picking up the flag and not explaining it, but then calling out the penalty before you picked up the flag. I mean, and this points to one of the endemic problems of officiating in the playoffs, specifically because the NFL mixes and matches the referee crews. People aren't, reffing with the crews that they had for the entire season. And so that creates a lot of communication problems because a lot of these crews are ref together for years and years. They understand sort of what the direction the crew is taking and stuff like that. And in the playoffs, that doesn't happen. Just like random mix and match. And so, the head linesman and the back judge and the ref and the ump, they're not on the same page. And so, I think it was like what the head linesman said it wasn't pass interference, and the side judge said it was pass interference, and the head linesman was judged to have a better angle on the action, which from the broadcast seems kind of suspicious, but whatever. And so he overruled the side judge in the referee's eyes, none of which was explained. That would have been like a perfect time for an explanation. And I don't know, it was handled so poorly. Especially when you have like the whole resurgence of the Dean Blandino was seen partying at the Cowboys bus, that story from like half a year ago and stuff like that.
It really feeds into a lot of like kind of populist anti-Cowboys narratives.
Yeah, it does. And which, I mean, like, clearly the NFL's not corrupt in favor of the Cowboys. I think sort of the last couple of years is pretty good evidence of that. But I mean, damn, that's just terrible.
The Detroit Free Press was correct to publicly ask for an apology from the NFL. I mean, they sort of got when they got an admission of fault, which, I mean, what a horrible thing to read as like a Lions fan. Like,
right.
Your team is, busto from the playoffs. And, not if they would have ever, gone any further necessarily, but then to have the league just be like, yeah, our bad, sorry. Better luck next year.
So, like, that's like one of the issues, right? Because something awful happens in terms of officiating, right? And then the league is just like, yeah, I guess something awful happened, huh? Well, without like any in the future we'll correct this, because you can't like provide recompense in form like a rematch. That would be awful, right?
No, that's a rabbit hole. You can't do that. But you can. But like
you could say like, look, this is our system for dealing with that and making sure that referees are held accountable. Because, and this is weird, because of all the places to have good ideas in terms of the way that officiating works, Pro Football Talk is not really sort of the place that pops up at the top of my head. And I'm sure if I ran this by like some of those, referee websites like footballzebras.com, they would have like sort of a more interesting opinion of whether or not this is like feasible or anything like that. But their argument is pretty good, which is, so we've known that some of these refs are awful. We've known that for years. We've known that Pete Morelli is bad. We've known that Jeff Triplette is worse. And we've known that for years because they've been in the league for years. What is this? In the NFL, rookies replace vets, and maybe it doesn't make sense maybe the talent pool in college is just not good enough to replace head refs, which is actually, and Pro Football Talk doesn't even mention this. That's not what even people would be asking. They'd ask for some of these refs like Jeff Triplette and Pete Morelli and, so on, to be demoted, not eliminated from reffing games, but demoted to like say umpire or back judge or head linesman, and then have one of the more experienced members of that crew, or maybe a different crew because you need like to change the culture of the crew or whatever. I don't know. Use whatever sort of team cliche you want, and promote a really good assistant referee to be the head of a crew, and then sort of because the NFLPA or the NFL keeps grades on the refs, use those grades to determine who can or cannot ref games. They have these grades. They do this all the time. They have these grades, and then they do not use them to assign playoff committees, because you have like a group of 10 different referees reffing the playoffs, not with the crew that they're in, that we already talked about that. Instead of, as Pro Football Talk again points out, the 4 best crews reffing the first 2 rounds of games, because there's only 4 games, right, in the first 2 rounds. And then the 2 best crews for the championship games, and then the best crew for the Super Bowl. Like, you could just have that happen, and that would be awesome. But instead, that doesn't happen. We don't have the best graded refs do the best games. We don't have the best graded refs sometimes do any games in the play. Like, it's like insane. And when you do poorly, you don't get demoted. And when you do well, you don't get promoted, because these guys stay forever until we end up finding out how bad they are when they start like becoming guests of officiating on like Fox Sports, Mike Carey. And there's only promotion when someone retires. Like, why even have a grading system? Anyway, we know that there's a pretty significant difference between how good they can be and how bad they can be, not only because of how well, like really well reffed games are. Like, say Clete Blakeman, who has reffed, I think, 2 games for the Vikings. He's reffed a couple of other games I've watched this season. I think he's a really good ref. I think he hasn't gotten enough play as a really good ref. I think no one knows his name because he's a super good ref. And I don't think he's reffing any of these playoff games. And if he is, he's not reffing enough. But I mean, put him in a more prominent position, put him in primetime games, demote whoever, and then promote a college guy. But there's a huge difference between him and like Jeff Triplette. But we know that there's a huge difference also in quality, because we saw the replacement refs, which I think we can agree are worse than the refs. Even as much as we say, oh, we complain about the replacement refs all the time, and then this happens, and we see how bad our refs are, and maybe the replacement refs are so. They were awful. The replacement refs were abysmal.
The replacement refs were so bad they ended the labor dispute.
Yeah. So we know how bad they can be, but the replacement refs weren't drawn from the best college refs or the second best or the third best. I mean, they were drawn from like the Lingerie Football League and people who were fired from the Lingerie Football League. So I think we can do better. I think that we can do better than Pete Morelli and Jeff Triplette reffing crews, because there are some really, really, really experienced refs just hanging out in crews that haven't been promoted for years and years and years because the system is awful. And how does the how does the NFLRA have this much power to prevent the system from being put into place? The labor dispute we just saw, is that why? That's awful.
Well, wait, so do you have any particular preference for, because you talk about how referee crews in the regular season are generally set for the season, or set across seasons, but playoff crews are not the same.
I have no idea why that is.
But in this system where a ref's opportunity to referee games or be a head referee is directly tied to their performance as a referee and their performance grade, wouldn't that lead to a lot more, I guess, inexperienced crews or crews that have less time working with one another due to just personnel shifting? Or do you think that once some good refs finally got established?
Well, okay, so 2 things. First, I think that the positive benefit of promoting good refs and demoting bad refs probably outweighs the issue of chemistry, which I already mentioned is pretty important. So I'd probably be contradicting myself if I didn't at least acknowledge that that's pretty important. I think that probably outweighs chemistry. But I think the second thing is you don't make any of these changes until the end of the season, and then they're set for the season. They work together in the preseason, and they work together when they do training camps and stuff like that. And maybe that doesn't do the same for chemistry as it is for having the same refs for years and years and years. But I think it's better than Jeff Triplette being asked to ref any more games.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, would it ameliorate a good portion of this to just have playoff crews be the same as regular season crews?
Yes, I think even with some of these bad referees, I think even with that, if they're going to ref games anyway, then you should have them with the same crew so you can prevent these communication mistakes that look really awful. And I mean, it probably would have called holding, honestly, because sometimes you hold back from making calls, or you make extra calls because you don't know what the head linesman wants. And as a referee, you probably don't want to be you probably have an inherent bias against throwing the flag, especially in critical situations, because you don't want the flag to decide the game.
Or you don't want to be the guy that has the flag picked up by the head referee or whatever.
Exactly. And so I think that in situations where you're unfamiliar, you don't throw the flag when you should. Right. And so I think that's what happened on that fourth down drive. I can't prove it. It's pure speculation. I don't know why that's true. But I think that there's like a good argument to at least speculate that may be the case, why Sue didn't get that holding call. On the other hand, Sue shouldn't have been in the game, so there's only so many tears you can shed.
I was convinced that Detroit would lose that game if Sue played, and win or lose that game if Sue did not play, and win that game if he did, and that Sue would have gone out of his way to like break Tony Romo in half like a candy cane.
Yeah, well, I guess their offensive line had thought of that and just decided to double team and hold it.
Anything you can do to keep that monster away from your quarterback, because God, once he gets past your line, God only knows what's going to happen back there. It's probably not going to be legal. Sue obviously ran out of fucks to give years ago. Like you just don't want that to happen. That's like the worst thing that can happen to your team. So I read an interesting tidbit today on the Dallas localized version of ESPN News. The Dallas Cowboys have not lost a game that New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has attended this season.
Why is Chris Christie that into the Cowboys? I mean, he is a Giants fan too, but maybe he's only officially a Giants fan, and because he's huge friends with Jerry Jones for whatever reason. I don't actually know what that reason would be, because I don't really like look into their business connections. It may just be like a rich person's club or a business thing.
Well, there's a quote that might illuminate the relationship for you a little bit more, and right there in the third paragraph. And Jerry Jones has a thing about mojo. He's very serious about mojo. And Jones said on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, he, as in Governor Christie, he's part of our mojo. I want him there all the way. I'll tell you, if he's got enough mojo to pull this thing out, he ought to be looked at as President of the United States.
That wasn't an awkward transition at all. Come on, Jerry.
That is some mighty fine log rolling right there. That is the log rollingest log rolling that has ever rolled a log.
As if like Texas wasn't going to vote for Chris Christie if he was on the ballot.
Well, I don't think it's about that. I think it's about, him running for president with some of Jerry Jones's fortune. But that's
assuredly that will happen.
That's a story for. And I know nothing makes more sense than that, right?
Right.
Other than Jerry Jones's obsession with mojo, a quote from further in the interview. I don't know how we in any way can even think about going up there without having him with the way we're playing and the mojo. Jones said, I know I'm doing everything else the same way I've been doing it for several weeks. Alluding to either early stage dementia or deep superstition.
So he's been doing everything the same.
For several weeks.
And is his argument that includes Chris Christie showing up and they've been winning games? Or is his argument that I've been doing everything the same and the only thing that's changed is Chris Christie showed up and then we started winning games again? Like, which one is his argument?
It's probably the first.
Well, then how do you know it's Chris Christie? How do you know it's not like the carrot juice that he drinks every morning?
Well, no, that's why you have to do everything the same. That's why Chris Christie has to be at every game, because if you change, since you don't know what the
I didn't read the full headline. I only read the link. So Chris Christie is part of our mojo, which includes like the fact that I change my adult diaper at like 4:17 p.m. every day.
Exactly. The fact that my first scotch is served to me at 9:58 in the morning and my third scotch is served to me at 10:56 in the morning.
Okay. Sure. If you're superstitious, it's like I'm sure like Jerry Jones is not as superstitious as Wade Boggs, right? So.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, he's approaching like baseball player, poker player level of superstition, which can get a little bit surreal for people who are generally known for being, coldly analytical to the point of it, harming personal and professional relationships.
Yeah, I'm sure Jerry Jones has never let his gut get in the way of personal and professional relationships.
No, never. Oh boy. What do you think about what do you think about Dallas's chances on Saturday? Are they the NFC dark horse that I mean, is it even possible for the Cowboys to be a dark horse given the amount of media attention they gather simply by making the playoffs? And if so, are they the NFC dark horse that has been appearing as a measured take above the byline of some sports writers?
Yeah, because I think that the only team that's ever been given a chance in a hypothetical matchup against the Green Bay Packers is the Seattle Seahawks. So any team that you say has the ability to make it to the Super Bowl, if you say that, then they become a dark horse if they're not the Seahawks or the Packers. In this case, yeah, I think that the Cowboys play well. At Lambeau, I think that they can absolutely. My issue, of course, is that, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. I'm not going to, shock the world with this analysis. Is that, I mean, how can you trust that defense against that Packers offense? I mean, Tony Romo can have the game of his life and lose. That's the problem, right?
And that would be a very Tony Romo thing to do.
Actually, yes, it would be. Contrary to popular understanding of Tony Romo, it is far more likely, given his history, that he plays an extremely important game really well and loses than he plays poorly in an extremely important game and is the cause of the loss.
Oh yeah, well, and the joke is, Tony Romo, the choke artist, and I've been guilty of promulgating that when it was unfair for quite a while last season.
Well, because it's a good punchline. I mean,
well, yeah, and maybe at the beginning of this season, but I shut up about it because Tony Romo, despite the nagging injuries and playing through, I guess, constant pain this season, has put together a pretty freaking legit season, and I do think that it would be very much more Tony Romo to play very, very well. And, maybe make, one desperate mistake to try and save the game in the fourth quarter against Green Bay and, have it picked off and then have that, be the ESPN clip of the week until next Saturday.
Right. I mean, yeah. That would be totally appropriate.
What's the over-under on the Green Bay Dallas game? Like 52?
I'm sure the over-under is not high enough. Well, so the line, I think, is actually only 7 in favor of the Packers. If I remember correctly, I'm going to double check that real quick. So the line it's only 6 in favor of the Packers, despite the fact that the Packers are at home. But you're right. The over-under is 53. Wow.
52 and a half. Wow, that's generous. Well, I mean, it is Dallas and Green Bay. I mean, I imagine I would feel good taking the over on that. And
yeah,
I like Green Bay.
Yeah, I think Green Bay -6 is really. Oh, Green Bay -6 at -125.
Oh,
I haven't adjusted the line yet to agree with. Yeah, okay. That makes more sense in my head.
But still, I would give Green Bay 10 points.
Yeah, I'd probably give them like 8, 9. I'd basically agree with you, yeah. Yeah, so at least Tony Romo has an extraordinarily good road record this year, both in terms of the individual stats he puts up, and I guess if you measure quarterback wins. Because with their like 8-0 or 7-1 on the road, and Tony Romo has the highest passer rating on the road out of any player in the NFL right now. I think in that context, yeah, that's at least something. I just don't know if that is, unless that's something he's been doing for like the last 3 years of his career, it's not something I would bank on. But at least it's true, right? So I'm still, it's if the Cowboys play really, if they play as well as sort of the top quartile of their performances this year, and if the Packers play average for themselves, I think it's a close game, which I think speaks poorly to the Cowboys' chances of actually winning.
But Aaron Rodgers is one of the rare quarterbacks who actually is more efficient and like plays better in the playoffs.
I mean, yeah, but sample size.
That's fair.
So
still, Green Bay to win it. On the AFC side, I mean, Baltimore's going to lose, right? So
what's buoying the line, I think, in favor of the Baltimore Ravens, stuff that we historically on the North Good podcast do not agree with, is the Ravens' record against the Patriots in the playoffs is like super good since the Belichick era, something like that. It may even be undefeated.
No, I think they lose in 2011. I know they won in 2010 and 2012.
Whatever it is, it's irrelevant.
Again, you just said small sample size, yeah.
Right. And then the second thing that people are like really excited about is Joe Flacco's postseason record, especially not record, but like statistics or whatever, especially of late, because the last time he was there, he won the Super Bowl. There's like an ESPN statistics, like Joe Flacco's last 5 playoff games, which was like this one, and then everything but the wild card game that they won the last time they were in the play. Like, yeah,
and
man.
Forget to indicate that all those wins basically came during a Super Bowl run.
Right, like they just like conveniently didn't mention it, but like they were like he's been 5-0, which like that kind of implies that he won a Super Bowl along the way.
And that's way different than like Andy Dalton's like 0-5. Like,
so Andy Dalton, as an aside, Andy Dalton is this really curious case where you just want to say splits happen, but they just keep happening, and you just don't know how much you trust the statistical side of your brain that says this isn't a thing. It can't be a thing. It makes no sense this is a thing. But man, is he terrible in primetime games. Holy crap. Pass rating is like 20 points lower than the second lowest quarterback in primetime games. Like
he doesn't like those cameras zipping around over his head.
Yeah, and that has to be it, right? You can't play under the lights. But like, and you're reminded of the XKCD comic where they test like all 20 jelly bean colors, and they find like with a 5% confidence level that one of them is statistically associated with cancer or whatever. But I mean, it is statistically significant that he's 20 points lower. I think the second lowest is Christian Ponder, who's bad in primetime games because he's bad.
He's just bad and happens to play primetime sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. But Andy Dalton, like the reason Andy Dalton, up until like midway through this year or something like that, the reason Andy Dalton has had statistically average quarterback performances despite this problem is because, and I mentioned this on Twitter before, he's like Invisible Boy from Mystery Men. When no one's watching, he's a superhero. He's played some extraordinary games. Phenomenal, pocket awareness and pocket management, great confidence, great ball placement. He knows exactly what he needs to do with the ball, where to put it. He's got great touch or velocity when he needs it. He reads the field well. He moves off of his progressions. He doesn't force it to AJ Green. He doesn't make egregious decisions. Like, he's like really good in games that like no one watches.
when they're playing the Browns.
Well, I mean, the Browns actually have a pretty good defense. They've had one for like the past 3 years. So yeah, I guess. Only people in the state of Ohio get to watch it. But yeah, I mean, like, but it has to be a thing, right? Which implies that maybe it's a thing that Joe Flacco is really good in primetime games. Although, actually, the statistics don't show that. But if you only look at the last 5 playoff games, they do.
But I mean, how good can
New England's going to win.
Yeah, how good can he be in Foxborough? And New England has like been resting
Right.
all of its starters except for Tom Brady in like cryogenic storage for approximately 10 years. Rob Gronkowski will come out of like cryo
Right.
storage
No,
age 21 and just run all
it's
over Baltimore.
your mic did some weird stuff there.
Oh, am I back now? Or do I still sound weird? How about now?
Hello?
Is this better?
You're back now.
Okay.
You stopped yeah, it's a lot better. You stopped out right before you mentioned the resting the starters thing. And then you
Oh,
just cut in and out and the speech slowed down and it sped up and stuff like that.
okay. Then I will go back to what I was saying in 3, 2, 1. And yeah, I mean, New England's defense is, going to they're not going to be quite as pliant against whatever, crazy looks they dream up for Joe Flacco. I mean, New England's going to win. They got this. The Indianapolis-Denver game is a little more interesting, I think. Jim Irsay, of course, is confident that the Colts will not only beat Denver, but make it to the Super Bowl.
I mean, A, it's Jim Irsay, so don't trust him. B, I mean, he is the owner of the team. He's not going to say, like, I don't know about this one, guys. They're a pretty good team.
Well, that's true, but,
but, I mean...
Jim Irsay, like, he's not a particularly public persona, at least not, right now. He's still trying to, weather the PR storm of being a cash hoarding pill popper. But he actually made a media appearance at the team facility to tell some intrepid members of the media how highly he thought of the team he owns. And also to throw some hardcore shade at Peyton Manning. Peyton is still playing at such a high level, Irsay said. I thought that he would. It was, again, great that he was able to go to a team and get surrounded with great players like they've surrounded him with. Ouch.
Oh. Did he just take a shot at Pulley?
Oh, and then he takes a moment to congratulate himself.
Right. It worked out exactly like how I envisioned it too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Something
My
like
vision
that.
at the time was that it would work out this way, that Peyton would be able to go somewhere, continue his greatness, continue his career, and we would be able to go forward with Andrew.
If he thought that and he had control over personnel decisions, then you would have drafted Andrew Luck and kept Peyton Manning. Like, what's the downside to that? Can they survive on the same bench, guys?
I don't believe this was part of your grand plan, Jim Irsay. Screw you.
It's really lucky that that Manning got injured, or Manning's injury extended into a year right before Andrew Luck declared. Man. But so here's one thing that people aren't talking about with Denver. Yeah, it's phenomenal planning. One thing that people aren't talking about with Denver is how good this defense has become in the second half of the year and how good it can be in ways that are sustainable. It's one of the best run defenses in the league when you take a look at things like success rate. Yards per carry, it's pretty good, but success rate is either the best or the second best in the league. And in terms of net yards per passing attempt allowed, once you adjust for opponent, they're actually the best in the NFL. Like, it's better than Seattle, which I think if you put the defenses up against each other, I mean, Seattle's is better. But statistically speaking, they're in the conversation, I think, and I think that means for a quarterback and Andrew Luck just had one of the best performances he's ever had in his career. It's a very storied, impressive career that includes like 8 million fourth quarter comebacks. But I think for a quarterback that takes as many risks as Andrew Luck does, I mean, a defense like Denver's that intercepts the ball at like a league average rate, but doesn't allow that many yards because quarterbacks have to constantly check down against the coverage that they didn't expect to be this good. That has a pretty good pass rush despite down years from a number of their pass rushers. I think this defense can carry a team, generally speaking, into the playoffs. And even Peyton Manning at his, his 2014 decline or whatever, is an enormous addition over an average team, right? And so This is kind of the conversation we were having about the Vikings. You have an average special teams, an average offense, and a stellar defense. You could do a lot. And this is more than an average offense, even with Peyton Manning, at where he is. Because, Vontae Davis is really good. Greg Toller's playing better than he ever has. Eric Walden is playing well, which is weird. But I think that he can do a lot against this defense. And so I think that it's not going to be an extraordinarily close game because people are sort of discounting how good this Denver defense is. Because once you take into account that it's a top 5 defense, I think, in my opinion, especially, with everything, pumping with DeMarcus Ware, sort of back to what he should be and Von Miller being Von Miller and, all that. Then I think that Indianapolis doesn't have the ability to compete despite pieces on their defense improving significantly from where they were like 2 years ago.
Oh, I think that's pretty accurate. Bradley Roby, Aqib Talib, Chris Harris, Raheem Moore, these guys are a legit defensive squad. And if anyone can throw for a bazillion yards against you and, like 800 touchdowns, it's Andrew Luck. And the guy's had a pretty charmed career. There's no doubt. And he takes a lot of risks, but Aqib Talib will put a knife in your heart if you take one too many risks. He is just the guy to pick off an interception and run right back through your offense and score and, close the door on a comeback.
And Chris Harris is so good. He's so good. Chris Harris is one of the best corners in the game.
It's true. 51 tackles on the season. And a sack.
That's like the worst possible.
It's the first one I saw that I could give you. His 3 picks are pretty good.
Yeah, I'm gonna let this Pro Football Focus thing load. Let me see what Pro Football Focus has to say about Chris Harris this year. Because obviously, I've been impressed by what I saw, but if I defer to an external authority, people will believe me more, right? Yeah. All right, so we'll take a look at PFF's grades and their cover statistics to see if I'm off base about this Chris Harris being really good thing, which I think would be surprised if I was, right? You'd be surprised if I was off base about that because he's been very good this year. You follow this team.
That is true.
All right, so in yards per cover snap allowed, Chris Harris leads the league by a significant margin. Wow. So he's allowed no touchdowns, 3 ints. He's only allowed a passer rating of 47.8, which is the second best in the NFL. And then in yards per cover snap allowed, he's the best in the NFL, 0.57 yards given up per snap in coverage. The second best is Richard Sherman at 0.76, enormously. Chris Harris is targeted about a league average amount of times because he often covers the best or second best player on the opposing team, despite how good Aqib Talib is. And in terms of cover snaps given up per reception, he ranks 5th. So from a statistical look, based off of the advanced stats provided by Football Focus, by Pro Football Focus, there's a good argument. Oh, and PFF has him as their number 1 corner by a significant margin, by 6.8 points. Wow. Okay. Cool.
Not just the best, but the best by a lot. Chris Harris. You heard it here first. If there's one hot take you can pull from this episode, it is that Chris Harris is really good, or like really, really good,
like super good.
Both Harris and the Colts' Vontae Davis are on the Pro Football Focus first team. They're all pro squad.
Yeah, well, there you go. Oh, and Vontae Davis, of course. Not to make like a story of the game or anything.
Yeah, Vontae Davis
was lacking in stories, I guess.
I know it's not like there's a million reasons to watch a remarkably dynamic game that the Broncos are going to win. Vontae Davis had the lowest opposing quarterback rating in the NFL of 38.8, second lowest completion percentage when targeted, 43.7, and also 0 touchdowns in coverage on the season. Second rated cornerback overall behind Chris Harris. So there you go. Although Chris Davis was snubbed as an NFL first-team All-Pro in favor of Darrelle Revis and Richard Sherman. Sherman, all right,
Yeah.
but Darrelle Revis, really?
He's had a good year.
But a good year, but not the best year. Not the number one All-Pro year.
Yeah, but I mean, he is worth like a second-team All-Pro spot. It's not a huge, like it's not that surprising. I mean, it's not just name recognition. He had a pretty good year. He's 4th ranked by Pro Football Focus. So not a huge shock.
Well, there you go. But he should be second team then.
In cover snaps per reception, 3rd overall. That's pretty good, right?
So really, you could mix and match these guys and make an All-Pro first team and second team. It sounds like.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, he doesn't get targeted very often. He ranks 2nd in cover snaps per target. Does give up a couple of yards though. Seems like he may be burned deep. He only ranks 8th in yards given up per cover snap. And as a result of those yards and the 2 touchdowns he gave up this year, 2 touchdowns, he ranks 9th in passer rating given up. Second team All-Pro if I've ever seen it.
The line has Denver by 7. Over under is 54, which is quite generous. I think I might actually want the under on this one.
Yeah, I would take the under on that actually. Just because I mean they're both passing offenses going up against really good passing defenses.
Yeah, this game may be less passy than everybody anticipates, or it may start out that way and then change.
It surprises me that the over under of that game is higher than the over under of the Dallas Green Bay game. Yeah, that's
weird to me. Go figure.
Oh well.
So that's your, I guess, week 2 precap with the week 1 recap kind of thrown in there.
Yeah, we definitely spent way too much talking about the Patriots.
It feels incomplete doing it during like wild card week because it's like, well, there should be more games, and it's like, no, there really isn't. I don't know. What can you really say about New England and Denver other than that they'll probably end up playing each other in the AFC Championship?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's it. That's the argument, right?
That's my hottest take of the show.
God, I'm going to be so ecstatically happy Peyton Manning wins the Super Bowl. I mean, you'll be happy too, but for different reasons.
I mean, well, I think
some of the same reasons.
A lot of similar reasons. I mean, I have not been hearing it for quite as long or from quite as many, other learned people as you. I haven't been a diehard Peyton Manning fan for as long, but we in Denver hear the same crap from all the fans of other teams about how Peyton Manning falls apart in the playoffs, and he's a choke artist, and he's not even close to as good as like Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, and he's just been surrounded by greatness all this time, and Pierre Garçon made him look really good in Indianapolis and all this horse crap. like what? All right.
Yeah, all that talent that he was surrounded by that went 2-14.
So yeah, it'll be very like the city of Denver will explode with joy. Like it will be like, Sting style yogic orgasm for the city of Denver if they can close the deal this season, because there is so much orange pride around here that everybody wants Peyton to collect his trophy. They feel like he's earned it. He has, won the love of, Denver fans. And, John Elway has put together a hell of a football team.
I was actually just about to mention that. So this is my ideal scenario. So the Seahawks and the Broncos meet up in the Super Bowl again. Probably not very many storylines.
That sounds like a really boring matchup. I can't imagine that there would be any interesting hype in the week, in the blank week leading up to the Super Bowl.
So Manning versus the Seahawks, and Manning learns from the earlier game that they had against the Seahawks, obviously because that's what he does. He absorbs information, and the game is such a blowout for Denver that even though it's the Super Bowl, Manning stops playing sometime in the third quarter. And Brock Osweiler still gets screwed, and John Elway plays the rest of the game.
Brock Osweiler goes to put his helmet on, and then he looks over, and there's John Elway sitting in a Broncos uniform, and he just gets up and suits up and walks on the field. Poor Brock just spikes his helmet down, goes to the locker room, he's like, "Fuck this."
It already happened to him once this season.
I know. He just doesn't see Elway on the sideline at any point in the game, but then right as he's about to go in, he looks over, and there's Elway just sitting there in a Broncos uniform with a helmet on, and he just gets up and goes in.
In a strange move for the Super Bowl this week, the Broncos have activated John Elway, which I didn't even know that was possible, Troy.
There's a redacted line on the roster, on the active roster for that game. The Broncos are employing some sort of deception tactic. We're not sure who the last player on their active roster is. Hashtag sources are reporting that it's John Elway, but that can't be possible. Well, John, he's got great pocket presence. And I saw on a sign at the airport that he's had LASIK.
Oh man, and they can own a bunch of franchises and vote Republican together. Peyton Manning and John Elway riding off into the Denver sunset.
What kind of restaurant would Peyton Manning open? Because John Elway already has Elway's the Steakhouse.
Probably a Papa John's.
You just double down on the whoring. You just become a better shill.
Yeah.
Log roll for Papa John.
I like the idea of Peyton Manning just really gloating about another Super Bowl win. So all the little tables that they put in the pizza to make sure the box doesn't fall onto the cheese, those should be Super Bowl rings.
Oh, the little box holder upper dealies, yeah.
Yeah.
Spacers, I believe, is the technical term for them.
They're tables because you use them as tables for your action figures, not dolls.
What kind of action figure? Those are some that's maybe a G.I. Joe could use that as a box jump box, but that's about it.
Look, man,
they're too small to be practical for Ninja Turtles.
It depends on which Ninja Turtle action figures you get, and in your wildly diverse Justice League, they need a place to rest.
Ooh, that's true. I love it. Hey, whatever. It's still cooler than singing a few bars from the Pokemon theme song, which I was glad to have missed that. So I don't have to think of it. I didn't even know what the reference was when I first heard it, but there you go.
Yeah. So there's Super Bowl rings. I mean, I don't even like Papa John's. I would order it if Peyton Manning was like, "Look, I'm awesome, and now you can be too with your very own Super Bowl ring."
If Peyton Manning wins the Super Bowl with Denver this season, then I might become interested in some crazy thing that I've heard about. I don't know if it exists, but I have heard tell that there is a Chinese merchandise website where you can order replica Super Bowl rings.
Perish the thought. Impossible.
And I would suddenly become interested in the idea of perhaps wearing a Super Bowl ring
that somebody had acquired.
Yes. As though it were my own. As though
Peyton
Manning did it for me.
Can't be illegal.
I can't imagine. Well,
Okay, so whoever makes the rings, do
Depends
they
on
own the copyright to the design?
no. As far as I know, they're in another country, and so I don't know what international trade law applies. But I guarantee you, if it was an American company, the NFL would sue the shit out of them for appropriating their trademark. I don't know if you can do that. I imagine the Trans-Pacific Partnership would make that possible, but that is a trade treaty that would make all sorts of horrible things possible. So in preparation for its eventual secret passage, I don't want to reveal too much about this foreign commerce site that may or may not be Chinese. But yeah, no, I would totally wear a Super Bowl ring if Peyton takes it down this year, because I would feel like he won the Super Bowl for me.
We all know that's a lie.
As a late Christmas gift, he did. He won it for me and every other member of Orange Nation.
He doesn't give a crap about Orange Nation. What are you talking about?
He flew to Alaska to meet a fan. He obviously cares.
He cares about his fans.
Yeah, and we are his fans. He's doing this for us.
No,
I mean,
you're fans of the team. He happens to be on the team, but he cares about the Peyton Manning machine.
Are you jealous? Are you like trying to hoard Peyton Manning's love all for yourself because you've been keeping it real for longer?
Yeah, you're just a bandwagon Peyton Manning fan.
Ah, ouch. That hurts. That hurts me. That hurts me. I've never been smeared on a podcast before.
Not true at all.
When I may have committed like crimes against knowledge, but I don't know that I've ever been smeared.
Well, I'm sure Andy's throwing some shade your way, right?
Who's he? Does he have a podcast or something? I don't know. If he does, I've never listened to it.
Who is this Andy? By the way, you should listen to the Andy Carlson show, powered by Vikings Territory.
Oh, is it the Andy Carlson? Is the Andy Carlson show also powered by Vikings Territory? I was under the impression that was a different podcast.
No, it's that podcast.
Oh. Ha! Well, there you go. The Andy Carlson Show, brought to you by Vikings Territory. No, I enjoy Andy's work. He's good with the clips. He's got good pithy movie lines stashed away someplace. I'm sure they're all fully licensed. Should we mailbag real quick and then call it a show? Believe it or not, our playoff show is meandering.
Shock. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Brad Davis at Delta BC Dad on Twitter, our multiple time donator and longtime supporter of the show, writes us: is it too early to start calling Johnny Manziel this generation's Ryan Leaf? Is it too
I didn't even see that question when I made that comparison earlier.
Is it? That is not true.
What do you mean? No, I didn't. I wasn't mentioned in the tweet, and I don't go reading Norse Code's mentions.
That's fair. Yeah, no. So inquiring minds want to know: is Johnny Manziel the new Ryan Leaf?
Well, okay. So no, even though I made that comparison, because no one can be the next Ryan Leaf, because Ryan Leaf has ensured that no one will be the next Ryan Leaf by being Ryan Leaf. And that means that no one spends a number 2 overall pick on somebody with that many problems from an off-field perspective, or that many concerns, maybe not problems, maybe concerns from an off-field perspective because of Ryan Leaf. And so the investment that the Browns made in Johnny Manziel, not nearly as much as the investment that Chargers made in Ryan Leaf. So that's number 1. It's easier to recover from a Johnny Manziel catastrophe than it is from a Ryan Leaf catastrophe. Number 2, Ryan Leaf owns some of the worst games of all time. Johnny Manziel had some bad rookie games, right? It is obviously a little bit too early to say that he's going to be bad or good as a result of those games, but it is highly improbable that he puts together some of the worst games of all time. So those are my takes. Still, man, it's not a good look, Johnny.
It's true. Ryan Leaf is like the Carthaginians. He killed himself completely and salted the earth behind him, so no one else can grow a bad quarterback. in his place. Gerald Tracy III writes us, we have a rough schedule next year with Denver highlighting one of the road trips. I will be attending that game. I can guarantee you that. Could this team improve on 7 wins or not? Yes, asterisk. I think we kind of covered that in pretty good detail in the season recap. You know, all things being league average and, you know, 1 or 2 things being above average. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. If things go well and they don't go horribly.
If God be willing and the creek don't rise.
Right. Good things can happen if good things happen. That's always been my take.
All I can tell you is that cool things happen with the warm taste of Kellogg's Pop-Tarts.
What?
Yeah.
Is that like a catchphrase Kellogg's uses?
Yes. Have you ever put butter on a Pop-Tart?
Don't. Not doing this right now.
Ian Pauley writes us at Leon Schmurgishboard on Twitter. Writes us, is offensive line as much of a priority as the media states? Well, does that make us the media? Even when considering injuries to Fusco and Lodeholt and the progress of Yankee and Tiny?
As an aside, yeah, it's always been weird references to the media, whether or not they include me, because sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. I've been lumped into the media a lot, fairly or unfairly, probably fairly. But I think people just have a different perception of me because I'm, like, obviously a fan of the team I cover. So, like, I don't know. But that's just an aside. We can discuss that sometime later in the off season when we have nothing to talk about. I think, I mean, like, it depends on, like, what you mean by is it right? Like, according to who, right? So according to people who are not the media, well, if you ask the players, obviously not. If you ask the fans, holy crap, yes. If you ask the front office, probably not. I think that they think that with a different offensive line coach and recovery from knee surgery, that Khalil can at least get back to league average, if not to his rookie performance, and they're not going to give up on him anyway, which means that they're probably not going to invest a lot in replacing him. Brandon Fusco's going to get healthy. Phil Lodeholt's going to get healthy. John Sullivan's going to stay John Sullivan. That's a pretty good thing. And then you just have to replace this guard. They evidently don't see a ton of problems with Charlie Johnson when they extended him like 2 years ago or whatever. But I think that they move on from him at the guard spot. But like, relatedly, they do have David Yankee, who the reason he wasn't active is because I guess he doesn't have enough strength, according to Mike Zimmer. Which, fine, presumably an offseason will go some way to resolving that problem. From the Vikings' perspective, I think that they have a lot of resources invested at guard, that whoever is going to win the battle is going to be an improvement over sort of the rotating situation they had at left guard this year. And so I think that the front office doesn't think that offensive line is as big a priority as we, the media, or those media over there, one of the two categories, thinks it is. And as a result, I don't think, and I mentioned this before, that if you put the Vikings in a mock draft where they draft an offensive lineman, you are agreeing with me in terms of how they should approach it, maybe, like drafting a swing tackle guard in the first round. But you are probably not agreeing with the front office, because I've said before, and I haven't said it enough maybe, I don't think the front office drafts an offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds. So to answer your question, depends on who you ask, but if it's from the perspective I think you're asking it from, no, it's not as big a priority as those media over there are making it seem.
Steve Johnson, ST_Vike, writes us, is this year an anomaly for injuries, or should we expect this to be the new normal?
That's a really good question. We covered that a little bit. I think that it is both. And by that, I mean, I think we should continue to expect more injuries than the Vikings have had over the past 4 years. But I don't think we should expect as many injuries as happened. Because, I mean, You had your starting running back-ish, Jerick McKinnon, get injured. You had your left guard get injured, or right guard. Well, you did have your left guard get injured, actually. You had your left guard get injured, you had your right guard get injured, you had your right tackle get injured. You had Sharif Floyd constantly kind of play without injury. You had Greenway injured. You had Anthony Barr injured. Basically every linebacker except for Jasper Brinkley, actually. And then you had Blanton injured. Yeah, it's a lot of people, man. And some of the backups got injured too. So, that's more than I think you could reasonably expect. But I don't think we'll see the injury levels that we saw before Mike Zimmer. I really don't know if that's because of Mike Zimmer or, it's just like they changed the conditioning program, they changed the strength program. The athletic staff is the same, but when you change things, either they get better or they get worse. And the anecdotal evidence seems to suggest that maybe they get worse.
That's disappointing. Steve's other question, and the final question of tonight's mailbag. How much of Zimmer's questionable game management is due to him calling plays, with cognitive load in parentheses?
That is a really smart question, and I call it smart because I hadn't thought of it. I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this, where she's super smart, right? She's like a scientist who was an athlete, who knows a lot of stuff about stuff. She picks up things super quickly, whatever. So there's all of the traditional reasons she's smart are true, right? But I tend to compliment her when she just says stuff that I hadn't thought of. I think that's true for everybody. I think everybody is just like, oh, that was smart because I didn't think of it, which is kind of egotistical on face, but it's probably not, because that's kind of the only way people will have to evaluate whether or not something is smart, whether or not my reference is average, whether or not my average, which is the only reference I have, could come up with it. And so we have a bunch of really poor ways of addressing in conversation whether or not something is smart. That's all on the side. I think that's smart because I hadn't thought of it, but also I think it's a pretty creative way of looking at it that may be true. See, if I had the show notes earlier, I would have anticipated this question and had a better answer. But I think that the answer is both yes and no, because I think that there are a lot of coaches who have the ability to call plays in game and manage the clock much better than Mike Zimmer did. And it is difficult at this point in time to separate the issue of cognitive load, which is something that a lot of people haven't been talking about yet. And I'm going to write about this, actually. Thank you. What's his name? John? Steve?
Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Steve Johnson.
See? I was really close. Steve Johnson. I'll always remember you. So thank you. I might write about this because of this super interesting concept. But it's hard to separate the issue of cognitive load in this case / distractions from the issue of, well, it kind of was his first year at being a head coach. And he wasn't like the other head coach, the other former head coach on staff was not super great at it. He also happened to call plays. So, I think it's difficult to separate that from this is my first time. He is acknowledging sort of post facto that these are things that I got wrong in that situation, and that sort of upon evaluation I would have done it differently. Which is one of many steps you have to take to resolve in-game management. But yeah, I think it may be playing a significant role, but that's not to say that it will continue playing a significant role, or that we have the ability to determine at this point whether or not it plays a significant role. Now I'm thinking of all the other people who call plays, and they're all terrible at managing the clock. But unfortunately, that's not very good evidence, because coaches in general are also just terrible at managing the clock. So, who knows? Andy Reid, North Turner. Ugh.
Mike Shanahan. Ugh.
Ugh.
Yeah, I feel like we could get a better answer to this question after next season. I mean, if he is, it seems like this is the sort of thing that if he, acknowledges that he screwed up, that he could improve with, practice and training, I suppose. You would think it would be a skill that you could learn.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like the point of practice and training, right? To reduce the cognitive load of activities that, it reduces the amount of energy that goes into decision making because you have a framework to make it. So yeah, I mean, like, maybe play calling takes like no energy from Zimmer at all, right? Well, that's probably not true, but you know what I mean. Maybe
if that's true, maybe that's why it's so bad.
And so, enough practice becomes second nature. Who is good at managing the clock in the NFL? Bill Belichick? Who else?
Bill Belichick, I would say. Pete Carroll.
Yeah, he's pretty
good. John Fox, not terrible.
Not Riverboat Ron. He's gotten better.
He's slowly improving. Mike Smith, maybe. I'm just trying to think of coaches. I
don't know if he is or not.
I'm just trying to think of people who are not known for making like egregious clock mistakes. No, I'm serious. Like, because it's one of those things where it's like, Invisible Boy. Like you wouldn't necessarily notice good clock management because it would just sort of naturally fit into the flow of the game. And that's kind of something.
This is like the dog who doesn't bark or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is it's a dog that doesn't bark. And you could never be able to like separate out instances of good management from instances of bad management because you would need to see an instance of bad clock management in order to separate it out, I guess. So I mean, just thinking of people who are not known for terrible clock management. I mean, there's the coaches of like the three best teams in the NFL, and maybe like I guess Mike Smith, maybe Bruce Arians. I don't
know. So the issue with that, and that doesn't mean you approach this from the wrong direction. It just means it's a flawed way of trying to evaluate it. So the issue with that is that all new coaches are really good at clock management until they start coaching a significant number of games. Like, is Gus Bradley bad at clock management? I have no idea.
That's true. Well, then the threshold becomes once you've played, or once you've coached, whatever the threshold is, 4 seasons, 3 seasons, 5 seasons, are you not the worst?
Right.
Because if you're not the worst, then you're probably fine. It just seems like, I don't know, clock management and, to some degree game management are just like, really nebulous concepts, really like difficult moving targets for coaches to hit. I mean, depending on your personnel, it might be best to delegate some of those responsibilities. Some teams have had success with that. Some teams have seen it work against them. Like, I mean, what does Tom Coughlin really do on the sideline?
He yells at punters.
It gets red-faced. he just looks like he's so over everything. That's like his only job on the sideline because he doesn't call any of the plays, does he? His coordinators do that, right?
Yeah, his coordinators call all the plays, but he is one of the. I think he like almost every year, and certainly cumulatively, is the best in the league at challenging plays or challenging referee calls. Extremely good at that, and the person who like signals down to him or whatever has changed like pretty significantly over the course of his career. So. I think like he has a pretty good intuition for that. He makes a lot of those calls. He does a lot of clock management stuff. I don't know. He does all the head coach stuff that isn't calling plays. It's very difficult.
Well, there you go. There's your answer to who's a good clock manager. Tom Coughlin.
Probably.
We have no evidence to suggest otherwise.
Right. Exactly. I'm sure if he asked a Giants fan, they'd have a very strong opinion.
Well, and that's the thing is
Rex Ryan. He's a bad. Well, it's actually debatable if he's a bad coach or he's just really bad at picking quarterback. This was in the clip show where I made the argument that Rex Ryan's a good head coach that just can't be in a bad quarterback situation, what is a good head coach now? Is Rex Ryan bad at clock management? Like his teams have been bad.
If you ask a Jets fan, I'm sure they'll say yes. I think the question of whether or not your coach is a bad clock manager depends on whether or not they like have lost a game recently. and that can probably be blamed on one instance where if a timeout had been called at time Y instead of time X, then a different game saving outcome could have occurred.
Do you realize whose name we forgot this entire time to mention who is genuinely good at clock management? Chip Kelly.
We are the worst pundits. Well, I am barely a pundit to begin with. You are the worst pundit in the history of football punditry. Your hot takes are forever rendered tepid. Yeah, of course, Chip Kelly. God. Their entire offense runs on the principle of him being a good clock manager.
He's really good at managing the clock because he doesn't care about time of possession. That's incredible.
Once you free yourself from the confines of these rules, you can become a Zen master. It's Chip Kelly and Jay Cutler. up there on that mountain.
Right.
accepting accolades. Well, I suppose that'll do it for these episodes of Norse Code, such as they were. You can find the show on Facebook, facebook.com/Daily Norseman. We'll take you to the Norse Code Facebook page. You can follow us on Twitter at NorseCodeDN. You can find Arif on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can find me on Twitter at Dusty O'Connell, 2 N's, 2 L's. I decided with the new year I would usher in a new Twitter handle. And Dustin O'Connell was already taken, which, as far as I know, there's only, according to Facebook, there's only one other Dustin O'Connell in America, and he was a football player at Western Montana University.
I do not believe that there was only one other Dustin O'Connell.
It's a pretty weird name.
What?
Even Googling myself is, not that interesting because there just aren't that many people that are aping my name. So I bit the bullet and was like, fine, Dusty O'Connell it is. You can find our producer James on Twitter at Big Mono. Make sure you stop by the Norse Code website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you can click the little yellow PayPal donate link in the bottom right-hand corner of the page and contribute your $5 to ensuring that Norse Code lives a long and happy life here on the internet, cranking out hot takes as fast as you can listen to them. We will return, I suppose, next week with a recap of the Week 2 playoff matches and a preview of the AFC and NFC championship battles, I suppose, along with whatever other Vikings news comes our way. Do you have any parting shots to fire before we put this episode in the can?
Nope.
Excellent. Then our formula is and shall remain that Christian Ponder sucks. We'll see you next week.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.